Welcome to the Acorn branch class. This class, even though the piece is only 5 by 7, I think that it will be a wonderful challenge for you. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the struggles that I went through as I was filming and painting this piece. Just going to check my audio real quick. I think it looks good. Let me go ahead and show you the piece as it is right now. I came back down this morning and added just a few more dark areas. I darkened this area just a little bit, darkened it a little bit here and a little bit there. As I was looking at it last night, I felt like that the greens were all just a little bit too the same. There really weren't those darkest darks that we're generally looking for in our piece. So I did make those changes today. It really is, as Lucy joins the class, the darks that I added really are a little bit more pronounced than the reference photo. Feel free to do that. Even though we have a reference photo, we need to use our artist's eye and really assess if we need to make any more changes to really make it pop and stand out for the viewers. So let's go ahead and pull up, if I can, the class itself. There's Lucy's tail. And let's just get started playing it. If I can hit all the right keys. So like I said, this is a 5 by 7 wood panel that I'm working on here. I'm using a fairly big filbert to start to lay in this background. Just wanted to check the speed, make sure it wasn't racing too quickly. So yeah, I'm just really looking at the background of the piece, of the reference photo, and just trying to get some of those colors based in. I like, Lucy, will you stop? I like in the reference photo how it yellows quite a bit toward the bottom. So I'm just trying to be somewhat loose, but watch where some of those color variations are. So this mixture is phthalo blue and Hansa yellow opaque. I've added a little bit of burnt sienna to tone it down a little bit. See if I can move me out of the way a little bit so that you can see the acorns being painted. This is really just a basic block in, just trying to get the first layer of paint in, just to kind of show where some of those shadows are. For the entire beginning of this painting, particularly when I start to add in the leaves, I really just did sort of a road map, not really worrying about the color being exactly right, but just finding the space where some of the leaves were going to be. Using a little bit of Titan Buff with the titanium white here to just, again, just get the first little base in of the acorns. Using a little bit of burnt sienna as well. These are a little bit hard to hang on to. They're pretty small, So, you know, if you're having trouble, you can certainly get out the painter's tape and use that to kind of hold them in place. So now we're going to start to base in some of that roadmap that I talked about before. So you can see here that I have used the tracer to add the leaves onto the background, and I'm just starting to put in a little bit of an idea of where some of those sky holes kind of come through. So I know that that's a lot bluer than I'm going to want it to be in the end, but it just gives me an idea of where some of those are. For the greens, I often talk to you guys about how I don't really love pre-mixing a big pile of paint. This is really one of the exceptions for all of the greens that we have here. This first day that I was painting, I didn't mix a big pile of green, and I really kind of fought with it. So my advice really would be to go ahead, use the phthalo blue and the Hansa yellow opaque, make yourself a decent sized pile. It's not a giant piece, but a fairly nice pile of just that medium green. And then darken, pull a little bit of that off to the side and darken it with, you can use burnt umber, you can use burnt sienna, you can use a little bit extra phthalo blue to darken it a little bit. You can also throw in a little bit of the quinacridone magenta, that also helps to darken and tone. But just have a little area of the darker green to the side, and then have a little area on the other side that has more of a light highlight color. So with a little bit more of the Hansa yellow for the lightest color, maybe a little bit of the titanium white. But if you mix those three values, then you'll have those colors on your palette, and you can adjust to the color from there without having to remix so much. I do love painting over the edges. I'm being very loose with what I'm adding to the side of this substrate, but I really think that it's a really cool look when you have some fun stuff going over the edge. So as I go through here, I'm really looking at the reference picture to see where the leaves are a little bit yellower, where I wanted them to be a bit more blue. I did put this reference photo in Procreate just to take a look at it, and the leaves really, when you pick out the color in Procreate, they really didn't lean as much blue as I felt like I could see in the reference picture myself. So I did make some of the mixtures just a little bit more blue. I liked how that looked. And I really did fight with the tracing that I did here. I used the Richardson graphite paper that I like, but I should have, before I started painting, I should have used my kneaded eraser a little bit more, just to soften some of those lines back there. So through this whole basin, I'm really being very, very loose. Like I mentioned, I'm not too worried about capturing the exact right color or the exact right value. I'm just trying to get the base of the paint in. I'm trying to map out where some of the areas are that just get a little bit lighter, just to give myself a good base to work from. And that's what I mentioned at the beginning of this class about this being a little bit of a challenge. it's not that it's hard to paint. It really is just that it's going to take those layers that we always talk about. So don't get discouraged. Keep painting, keep adding layers, and it will come together. It seemed after this first day of painting, it just seemed like it really wasn't going to come together. Some of the leaves have a little bit more of a gray tone to them. So I'm just using my favorite gray, which is the burnt sienna and the phthalo blue to gray out that green a little bit. So in your green mixes where you have the lighter green, just add a touch of burnt sienna, that will gray it, and you'll get that interesting tone, that interesting gray tone that adds a fun look to the piece. I did a little bit of that gray in the background. Really, with the background, I'm just trying to hint at the fact that there's things going on back there. There's leaves and other things. And I really like in the reference picture how some of the leaves had a really interesting light edge to them. So I work back and forth quite a few times to try to capture that fun light edge. This leaf up in the top left corner, in the reference picture, it has a lot of spots, a lot of like defects in the leaf. I didn't add that at all. I thought it would be just a little bit too distracting. You certainly can if you want to add a little bit more of that. You saw me here change to a little round. I was fighting a little bit with the small filbert. I just made myself stop, grab another paintbrush, and the round worked a lot better for adding in some of these veining details. When you add in the veining details, don't worry about making them absolutely perfect. You'll see as I come in here with the greens that I can refine some of those edges of the vein with just running my paintbrush over that line with some of the greens that I'm bringing in here. I hope that made sense. I didn't say that particularly well. The other thing that we can do with these veins, once everything is dry, we can always come back in with a wash and go over some of the areas just to settle them in a little bit more. Here I'm coming in with that lighter yellow that I was talking about on the edge of this leaf. And you can see that I'm laying in much more than I need. So that way I can come back in with the greens and push that little outline of the leaf back into shape as you see me doing here. So as you're painting all of these leaves, just remember as always that the brush direction, the stroke direction matters. So follow the veining of the leaves, follow that direction as you're making most of your brush strokes. Last fall, I was in the yard with the dogs, and we have these two beautiful swamp oaks in our north yard. And every year they have the most beautiful acorns until the squirrels get to them. But as I was out last year looking at them, I was just so inspired by how pretty they are. And so that's where the inspiration for this painting came from. And I think it's just really interesting as artists. Many times we have some inspiration or some idea that we've had for quite a while, and it just takes a little bit of time to actually get to either the right season where you want to paint it or to carve out enough time that you can sit down and paint the piece. So I hope that as you're out and about in your daily events that you're doing, that you're kind of looking around too and seeing the things that inspire you. These little sky holes coming in were a little bit of a challenge. I wanted them to be somewhat blurred out. So I just built them very slowly. So they're mostly phthalo blue and titanium white. And I started with them being a little bit more blue than I knew I wanted them to be. Began to add in some of the white around the edge. Once that dries, you can come back in and add a little bit more of that white highlight in the center. And just clean out your brush and set that in a little bit. So by cleaning out the brush, pinch wiping it, dip your brush into a little bit of airbrush medium, then you can tap into that highlight that you're making and settle it in a little bit better. There's so much happening with these leaves, and as you're painting, it's very easy to lose your way a little bit, I guess is the best way to put it. Just remember, particularly for some of these leaves that are more in the background, we just need a hint that there's a leaf shape there. Try not to let yourself get too much into the details. Just see the shapes and set them in, and our viewers' eyes will pick out what we're painting. It's and I know I've said this before, but it's just so nice to not have it so detailed and so rigid that there's not really room for your viewer to interpret what's happening. These little areas that I'm just working on that far right leaf are just little curls of the leaf that kind of bend over. So I go over that a couple of times trying to capture that and make it look like that leaf has a little bit of a bend or curl. So again, that's a little bit of a grayed out mixture, still leaning toward the green, but adding that burnt sienna in will gray your green a little bit, and it's a nice color for this. There's a lot of pinch wiping out your brush. As you lay in a color, pinch wipe out the brush and then go back in and not blend, but sort of pull it together a little bit. Managing the amount of paint in your brush is maybe one of the hardest things to show in a class like this, but managing your paint will really help you to not be fighting back and forth so much between the darks and the lights. If you set in some light and you feel like it's just going too far, pinch wipe out the brush, grab a little bit of your darker green again to pull it back in. So you saw there exactly what I was talking about. I laid in some of that dark, pinch wiped out the brush so I didn't have any more paint being added, and then just ran the brush along that paint stroke to settle it in. The same, you could see just there where I did a little bit of that yellow highlight around the bottom of that left leaf. That leaf is really blurred out in the reference photo. So after I set the green in, I come in with a little bit more of a yellowed green and do a brush stroke of that along the edge. Then I can use my mostly clean brush to just pull between those colors, and it sort of blurs it out. If you are using the wood cutouts, it's very easy to lose track of which cutout goes where. So set your acorns on the tracer to make sure that you have the right one. I fought with it for a few moments, couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong, and then I realized that I had them in the wrong order, and that's why they really weren't fitting the way that I wanted them to. So a few more veins here again with that round, and try to be loose. It's fine if the brush skips a little bit, misses some parts. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. In fact, it's better if it's not a perfect line. I'm just using that same color to come back around to some of the edges of the leaves, and again capture that light area around the outside edge. It's sniffle season. Anybody else fighting with sniffles already? I'm enjoying the cooler weather, but I don't like the winter sniffles. Here's a little bit of that darker green that I talked about before. So remember, this is just your basic green that we mixed. You can add in a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of more phthalo blue to darken it. A little bit of quinacridone magenta can also darken it. I wish I could see Lucy. This class is playing on another monitor to the side, so I can show it in this stream. So she's sitting over by that monitor watching my hand quickly paint. She's settling in well. I don't know if I mentioned before, we rescued her in July, and with two giant dogs, she had a little bit of a adjustment period, and so she's figured the dogs out and shows them who's boss, and she's a little bit like a dog herself. Wherever I go, she's following. If you don't follow on YouTube, I would love to have you be sure to drop in and follow. I have a lot of videos that I'm loading to YouTube. I'm getting ready to start a new series called the Everyday Art series. All the everyday art panels, all the everyday art pieces will be lasered onto a base substrate, and they'll all be smalls. So 4x6, 6x6 circle, the 6x6 square. So the nice thing about them is that they're very approachable paintings to do, reasonably fast. And since they're etched onto the art base, you don't have to do any tracing once you get your piece in. You're ready to just seal it with the GAC 100 and get started painting. So those classes will all be available for free on the YouTube channel. So I hope you'll drop in and be sure that you follow there. I'm really excited for that series. Those paintings are going to be really fun for art groups to do, really fun for senior living facilities to do. So they're going to be very, very straightforward. Not a lot of extra things, not, gluing wood cutouts down or anything like that. So I also think that they'll be amazing pieces for artists who sell their art. So a nice way to I'm so distracted by Lucy batting at the screen. Um, a nice way to add more product to your sales, whether you go to um, art shows or have a booth somewhere. They'll be really nice pieces for that. I wish I do have my phone. I'll have to see if I can grab a picture of her. Of course, the camera will lock up as soon as I try to do a video. Hmm. A camera that just doesn't want to work, of course. So this branch really does add some nice variation. I'm so sorry about. I felt like the camera wasn't focusing in on the piece as much as I wanted it to, and it's a little bit difficult sometimes in the streaming software to tell really what it's capturing. In other words, it can look different in the software as it's filming than it does when you see it. Um, and then of course just the fact that some of the leaves are kind of blurred out makes it difficult to tell. So this stick, the little branch that comes across is basically burnt umber, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of the Titan buff, and just really loosely adding it in. I'm coming back in here with just a little bit more of some things going on in the back. Like I talked about before, I just wanted to have enough going on back there. What is going on with my camera? It's always something, isn't it? There's always something to fix. Here's some of those whites that I talked about before. After that sky hole dries a little bit, coming back in with a little bit more white to really accentuate that highlight. I was really fighting with the camera. So there you can see I pinch wiped out the brush, or I have a little rag to the side, so I just go over to the little towel, wipe the brush off, and set it in. And that was me saying, hang on just a minute. I am running at this point to the laser lab to get the Star Bond glue so that I can glue these acorns down. When you glue yours, just make sure that your paint underneath is dry so that you're sure that you get a good glue on these, particularly if you're not going to resin. And then you could see there, I just used a towel to go over that stem. I wanted to just make sure that there wasn't too much glue. If there's too much glue and it seeps out along the edges, it can leave kind of a little bump that I really didn't want. Like I said, I think that I am going to resin this piece. I'm really thinking about doing some beads to add some texture to these, the caps of the acorns. But I'm just really kind of playing with setting in some of these darks So the dark that I'm using here is mostly burnt umber. And then I'm just tapping around some of the Titan buff and some of the titanium white, letting, being okay at this point if there's a little bit of texture. In the reference picture, you'll notice that the right acorn has a little bit of a green cast to it from the reflected light from the leaves. So I added a little bit of that as well. And then for the acorns, they're mostly burnt sienna. You'll see there I'm mixing up an orange, so the Naphthol red light and the Hansa yellow opaque. And then coming back in with basically a Titan buff and titanium white highlight on the edges. And I'm using this, it's kind of a bigger filbert for the tiny pieces that there are, but I'm just using it on its side and then letting the paint be a little bit streaky. Which kind of helps give that feel of the, I'm going to call it the graining of the acorns. I don't know that that's exactly the right word, but I hope you know what I mean. So you can see me there really building up the paint on my brush because I'm kind of looking for a little bit of that texture. And now I'm coming back in with the small round again and sort of beefing up some of those lighter edges and restating a little bit those sky holes that I was talking about. These little lines here really make a big difference. It really kind of pulled it all together when I came back in with some of these leaf edge lights that I'm doing here. I went back and forth with this little tip of this leaf a number of times. It's just kind of an interesting color when you look at the reference picture. Um, at first, I felt like I wanted it to be a little bit more blue. Then I felt like I wanted it to be a little more grayed. There's nothing wrong with, excuse me, there's nothing wrong with going back and forth, trying some things out and seeing what you like. If you do end up painting over it, all of those layers just still add, even if the color that was underneath of it wasn't perfect, it all still works together for the final piece. I felt like I wanted it a little darker behind these acorns. Again, the reference picture really doesn't show that, but at this point, I'm not looking at the reference picture so much. I'm more looking at the overall effect of the piece and making sure that it's just pleasing to look at. So remember, All of the downloads for this class will be in part one on Patreon, so be sure that you grab the PDF workbook. The reference photo is available in the workbook, and the tracer is also there. So grab those files, make sure you get those downloaded. Coming up to the end here, just take your time with this part. Have fun with just coming back in and looking to see what little details you can add that will bring the piece together. That is all of it. So I hope that you enjoyed this class. It really is a fun painting to do. It is a little bit of a challenge. I know that you'll hit that mark where you think, oh my gosh, it's just not working. Just keep going. Walk away from it, let those layers dry, and come back later. Even do that 3 or 4 times, letting it dry and coming back. And I know that you'll end up with a piece that you love. So that is all for Acorn Branch. Once I resin it, I'll for sure show the final pictures to you. But we're on to the Yuletide reindeer, which I'm really excited to get started with. So I'll see you in that class.